And we are live. So guys, obviously, if you can't tell by now, sadly, Jimmy is out for tonight. He went to the doctor and got the bad news that sadly he has the flu plus bronchitis. So if you guys can keep him in your thoughts and prayers, that would be awesome. But we have taking his place, we have Jeff from Print 3D channel here. And then we have Seth, also known as King Random or the Can Marker over on Twitter. Go check out his stuff. It is super awesome. So tonight's stream was very much a last minute idea, but word got to me that Type A Machines, which you guys may or may not have heard of, which was located out in the East Bay, the Oakland, San Leandro area, just officially announced that they are closing up their doors after, according to their webpage, 6 years of serving the community. So tonight we're going to be talking about if we think this is going to be an ongoing trend. Is this just a hit and miss thing? Stuff like that. So obviously, if you guys have experiences with companies that you know of that came in and left, please talk about it in the chat. We'll probably bring it in here. I'm still enjoying Super Chat while it still exists because I'm still in that dead zone with YouTube and their whole partner program thing. So if you guys want to drop a few bucks in there, no pressure to do so. It's totally up to you guys. Let's get the stream started. What do you guys say?
All right. Hey, Calvin. Thanks for having me on the stream tonight. I really appreciate it. Am I not going to full screen? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you fine. You're popping up good. And as again, thanks to Seth and Jeff for taking Jimmy's place tonight. It was definitely a last minute scramble to find people going, oh my gosh, who can come on? So really appreciate it, guys. Thank you again.
Did you literally do that while you were looking for, like, oh my gosh?
I plead the fifth on that one, but I may have been running around going like, oh my gosh, am I going to get people? I would have done the stream by myself if I had to, but it's obviously more fun when I have guests in here. So when you guys stepped up, it was a huge, huge thank you.
Oh, no worries. I appreciate you having us on, of course. I'm always up for a live stream. Haven't done much filming on the channel lately, so for me it's been kind of a treat every once in a while to get out there and talk to everybody online like this. So I appreciate it.
I would expect you were going to take a break.
Yeah, I took a break and then I kind of went through withdrawals, and I've been suffering from some kind of migraine-ish style headaches lately, and I'm going to see the eye doctor tomorrow, so hopefully that'll go away. And it's been kind of taking away my focus. Plus, it's February is sweeps month for television, and as most of you guys may or may not know, I do work in television, so preparing a lot of stories, doing a lot of 3D animation and stuff for the last couple of weeks, because they literally start on February 1st. So
busy guy on top of the whole flu thing going around and all the other news. So yeah, I can definitely say though that I understand the whole going through like that filming withdrawals, because for me it's like sometimes I will shoot a couple of videos in a row and then upload them and then release them as needed, or it'll be kind of like I just shoot them like a couple of days before they go up. But I know the feeling. There's some days where I'm just like I can't drag myself in front of the camera, and other days I'm like a whole bunch of stuff just happens. So you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Where I'm just like I can't.
Well,
we got some.
I'm trying to get the chat up. I can't, and it keeps starting the video. So
if you click on the right hand side of the chat, there should be 3 dots, and that if you click on that, it should say pop out chat.
Oh, okay.
And then you can actually close out the window, and then you can kind of like keep the chat in there and see what's going on. It took me a while to figure that out.
Well, this is the first live stream I've been on, so
it's all good.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, no problem. Ask Chris over at Practical Printing and Jimmy. My very first ever live stream attempt was the end-all, be-all, do-all of disasters. Like everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was bad, but somehow we managed to make it through. So,
well, you do have two Campbell's cans connected to a string for your internet connection. So,
Yeah, I pretty much like have to go out there with alligator clips and a multimeter, it feels like sometimes, and like clip on there and be like, wait, I got a connection. And then like run in the house and upload the video. Some days it feels like I don't really do that, but it feels like that.
I got a note from Spectrum today that said that they were boosting my speed from 60 megabits per second to 100 megabits per second.
Well, that's a nice little treat. At least you'll be able to upload a little bit faster, but it's the download speed that's really going to get you, because they still have, I mean, to really enjoy the internet, you really don't need a lot of bandwidth, but to download stuff is where they throttle you. You can get great upload speeds, and you can go to speed test and run a test right now and see what your speed is, but you won't get the same download speed as you do with your upload speeds. A lot of times they throttle you on the downloads because that's where people are doing it more. You know, if you're downloading, if you're watching Netflix, you're streaming a cached file to your computer, which is essentially downloading. But if you're broadcasting, which more and more people are starting to do, they don't mind giving you a boost on that end. It's the download speed and the clogging up the bandwidth that really makes a difference.
The funny thing is, though, is the ISPs, I believe, only pay for upload. That's why they give you that when you're getting the asynchronous, where you got to download. That's why that number is higher, because they're actually paying for what you're uploading.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
No, you're right.
So
I mean, in my case, I only get half a megabit a second download if I'm lucky, and I get about 3 up. But that's because AT&T has actually set it up because the internet is so slow that they figure more people are going to be downloading, so they bias it towards that, because obviously you download when you're watching stuff. They assume not a lot of people are uploading, hence they, you know, you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So it looks like we've got, jumping over to the chat here really fast, looks like we got Nathan Allen, we got Lucky13, we got King Random, which is you. We've got Unlikely Creators, we got Handy Outdoor Nerd, we got Rover. It's popping chat right now. This is impressive for, you know, for tonight. This is cool.
Well, coming on just a little bit earlier too might bring a few more people to the table too, because, you know, a lot of people won't be able to join 10:30, believe it or not, makes a difference. And sometimes you guys come on at 11, and, you know, for a lot of people, especially in the Midwest, that's 1, 2 in the morning.
Oh yeah.
And they can't join because, you know, they have kids in bed or spouses who want to sleep.
No, yeah, trust me, it's kind of like TV. You can never find a time that's perfect for everybody, but being that Jimmy works and, you know, that sort of stuff, this time slot works out better. I just decided to bump it a little bit early because I'm pretty tired tonight, but I wanted to give you guys a stream and especially talk about the news thing that came out and our opinions on it. So, you know, there's that whole thing that, you know, happened. But yeah, timing it is hard because then you don't want to go trampling on other people's streams, and you get what I mean.
Yeah, and everybody is taking advantage. And, you know, I'm not saying that the smaller channels are doing it more, but there seems to be more content coming out in the last, I don't know, 2 weeks from a lot of creators since the YouTube's obviously policy change, which is actually kind of refreshing because near the end of the year, it seemed to kind of piddle out. There wasn't as much coming out. And now everybody, even if they're a top creator, they're putting out more content to get more eyes out there again. Because I don't know if you watched Angus's new video today where he went to the Aldi to go buy the little Cocoon Touch, I think it was. And he was thinking there would only be a couple of them there. And there was like a whole skid and nobody had bought them yet. So he bought some filament and left. And then I guess he said one person bought one while he was there. But, you know, the last time Aldi did that, there was crowds waiting to get the 3 printers. And now they bring them in by the skid and nobody's jumping on it. Now, I don't know if he's got an update. Maybe he'll show up in the chat or something, and let us know if there's been. But I think the shine is kind of slowly coming off the whole 3D printing industry. And I think if the big manufacturers don't start wowing everybody pretty soon, we're going to see more like these Type A machine type of situations where it comes out of the blue. I mean, I don't know anything. You know more about them. Maybe you can explain it. I have the letter here up on my screen. I can I mean, the first line, it says, "It is with a heavy heart we announce that after 6 years of serving the maker community, Type A Machines is closing its doors." And then they go on to talk about their high parts of their company and just kind of say goodbye. I mean, it's kind of bittersweet to see a company go, but at the same time, I'm kind of learning to expect that.
No, and one thing I will say, and this is based off of, I'm not going to name any names here because some of them I didn't even know the name, and some I know from Twitter, but I'm not going to name them. From talking to former employees of Type A, they said the biggest problem the company had was customers would, give suggestions, employees would give suggestions, but the company just would not listen to the suggestions. And they feel that's kind of what did them in. I mean, to give you guys an idea of the machine, it could print a 1 foot cube, big prints here. But the problem with it was if you didn't buy what was called the pro level machine, which was, I think they can't look at the numbers right now because the website's down, but if I recall correctly, the standard machine was about $2,000. To give you guys a cost comparison, my Ultimaker 2 back in the day cost about $2,500. So this machine was $2,000. It could do a 1 foot cube build volume, but it didn't have an LCD screen, didn't have an SD card slot, didn't have a heated bed, and it literally had, do I have a computer fan? Okay, it had a bigger computer fan, but literally all the part cooler was just a fan that was held on by a little bracket that just blew down at the plate and you hoped it cooled the print. There was no ducting on it, nothing like that. Sure, you could print a duct for it, but I'm kind of looking at it going, this machine's like kind of sleek and elegant, but for $2,000, that's all they can do for cooling. It's a little bit iffy. And then if you spent the extra $500 to get the Pro machine, you also got a heated bed, a Wi-Fi camera, and still no LCD screen, still no SD card slot, because they wanted you to use the machine through their web interface or through a USB cable through Octoprint. But both at City College of San Francisco, which had a machine that I helped try and troubleshoot, that one had problems. And then my old job that I was working at got one in to try it out. And that one, I swear, the web interface after like 5 minutes would freeze up to the point where even if I closed the web browser and restarted it, I could not adjust anything on the machine. It was still frozen. And if anything went wrong on the print, I'd have to kill the power to the machine and turn it back on. So, and that's after the company had been around for like 3 or 4 years. So it really felt like they were so set in their ways that they didn't want to make necessary changes. And I think it sadly kind of caught up to them. I hate to say it. I mean, that's just based off A, my personal experiences, and B, talking to people who used to work there. We talked about how frustrating it was to know like it's a simple fix for this thing, but they just would refuse to deal with it based off statements that people had told me. And I kind of believed them on it, considering the problems were kind of endemic. And my old job even put me in touch with their engineer. He's like, yeah, we can't really do much about that. And I'm like, what? That's simple, So I don't know. I kind of based off my opinions on it.
Now, did you work with which version of the machine did you work on? How long ago was this? Was this recently or?
No, it was about 2.5 years ago, at least. I think it was maybe 3. I'd say about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, probably is when I was working with the machine over at the school. And that one was the non-pro machine, and that one was giving us problems. And it was about 1.5 years ago that I was at my old job, and we got the pro machine in. And I told them, I'm like, honestly, I've had bad experiences in the past with the machine, but if they still decide to send it to us, I will still test it. But I'm going to tell you guys straight up, I don't like their machines. And I could just never get the thing to do a good print. Literally, just randomly, the hot end would start jamming for no reason. Or their idea of how to set the temperature was to like crank the hot end to almost like 300 degrees and then just adjust the print speed to where it wasn't skipping. And I'm like, that's not how you're supposed to print PLA. That's not, no, you're supposed to set the temperature lower and keep your speeds moderate, not go whipping the machine around really fast because you can. I mean, I just didn't understand the way that they told us to try and calibrate things and do stuff. I'm like, That just doesn't, nothing in the conversations that I had with their technical support made sense to solve the problem, which was really frustrating.
Well, that would be very frustrating considering with all the technology that's surrounding everybody in the last year and a half. Like you said, a year and a half ago, you got some exposure to their Pro machine, which was if I remember correctly, you were mentioning it was like the $500 upgrade to their standard
minimum.
Machine, puts it at the $2,500 mark. Plus, you have all that other stuff that you have to do. Like I said before, we had our first giveaway was for the 3D printer starter kit. You can't just go to the store and buy a 3D printer, open up the box. Some of them include some PLA to print with, but not a lot of them do, because that's an extra expense considering they don't know what you're going to use the printer for. So they'll put in a little sample or a small spool, or maybe you'll get some filament. But that, again, that's still not all you need to get your 3D printer off the ground and running. So considering you didn't get it out the door, even in the Pro series, with all those add-ons that you actually need to do successful prints in that price range. And I look at it as price range, because if you put $2,500 down on the table and tell me you can buy a 3D printer, it's probably going to take me a month to figure out which one I want to buy, because there are quite a few of them in that price range that come loaded with tons of features. And if you put the Type A machine or the Type A machine in front of me and it didn't have those features in that same price range, I wouldn't care what they said in their brochures or their advertising materials to back up that this is a good machine. I would pass on it instantly. It would get unchecked in my list.
And I will say that they did include like a little starter packet, which did have like one of those little like spatula things to remove the prints and a glue stick and a few hex wrenches and little things like that. But then again, that's kind of like every machine usually comes with that, or it's so
the beginner's toolkit, you know.
Yeah, it's like, or it's so cheap and easy to get. It's like what, glue sticks are $1 or $2 a piece, and little spatula things like $2. Jimmy, I thought I told you to go to bed, dude.
Oh, Jimmy's in the chat.
So here's what I'm going to say. My $150 machine came with a heated bed, came with an LCD, came with, you know, the spatula, the screwdrivers, all that stuff, and they're providing it for $150. You know, here's the thing. The market for 3D printers at $3,000 or $2,500, there's only, you know, maybe there's 500 or 1,000 people that are going to buy that. There's 700,000 people that are going to buy the $700, you know, Prusa printer. There's probably 1 million people that buy the $150 printer like I did. You know,
no, and it's totally true. And I should mention though that they were trying to shoot more for like the prosumer market, kind of like Ultimaker. They had advertised literally like a print cell. It was an interesting concept. It was like 80-20 extrusion, that aluminum extrusion stuff, like what Jeff's printer's made out of, that sort of thing. But literally, they had like 4 machines high by like at least 6 or 8 machines across. You know, that's the market they were going for. But you made a very, very good point there, that the market for that style of machine comparatively is extremely tiny relative to, you know, the mid-range market, like the Prusas, the Ultimakers, the CR10s are more, you know, but, you know, like the G-Maxes, like the, you know, they're nice machines and they're in the higher price range, but they're definitely a lot easier-ish to justify than, like, you know, everybody has a different price point. But then again, you get into the really low-cost machines and it's almost like, wow, I could just not buy a couple of video games and then boom.
Literally, I went over to a buddy's house, and he had gone on Amazon and found a printer for $80, including shipping. It was wood. It was wood framed. It had a heated bed. It had a spring-loaded extruder. The only thing that wasn't making it print was when the hot end came, it came with a broken piece of filament in it. So I was just mind blown by $80 for an entire 3D printer. I don't know how these companies are going to survive when you can get bargain basement stuff, and it might work if you know what you're doing, but you can't sell a basic printer for $2,500, even if it is.
Oh, Chris just brought up a good point that, like he says, most people that are buying at this price point are also buying into an ecosystem. Same thing with Airwolf, and most of those people are also buying extended support packages. And that's very true when you buy into Ultimaker or some of these other printers that are in the $2,500 to $3,500 price range that are manufactured in a manufacturing facility. They come with a lot of extras, and you can do a lot more. The same way Apple does it with their Apple Care program. When you buy it, you spend another $150 to $200, which you think is kind of crazy at first, but it actually works out in the end because they replace equipment for free. And that's the same thing that happens with some of these companies too. When you buy into their ecosystem, like Chris says, you actually are buying into the company in a sense too. It may be a higher price point, and maybe if you priced out the parts on your own, you come up with half that. So the other part of that money that's going towards the printer is going to support this company in some way and make sure that you're able to print the same way. Now, if I don't know anything about Type A machines, so I can't speak for them. I've never heard of them until today. I think Joel mentioned it, that he'd done a review on them at one point, and I may have watched the video, but they are so far under the radar, obviously, that they didn't keep my interest long enough. For someone who's only been doing this for 2 years, every printer has my interest if they stay on the radar and they have a product that I'm interested in or that the community is interested in, because those are the ones I want to be following and seeing what products they put out. And when they go to CES or any of these maker fairs, I'm in their booths, but I've never heard of Type A machines. So
yeah, they definitely it's like if you were in the Bay Area, you kind of knew about them, but at the same time, yeah, they definitely were one of those companies that I didn't even know about them until they were in one of those Make Magazine end of the year, hi, this is a machine we're reviewing. And even then, I had not seen the machine in person. This is back before I even bought my Ultimaker. I was looking at it going, that's interesting, but I just wasn't very impressed by it, even compared to the printer bot Simple, the wooden floppy $150 machine that really crashed the low price machine market. But yeah, I mean, one other thing to remember is when you're buying a higher end machine, not saying that I'm speaking more from experience with professional CNC machines, but you get access to 24-hour helpline if you're having issues with the machine. You can call tech support at any time of the day, and they will have somebody in there who can either walk you through something or schedule a tech to come out there and replace it. And if it's within the warranty period, it's free. So all you have to do is deal with the downtime. But yeah, you're definitely at the higher price point. You're buying into that ecosystem. You're buying into that extra tech support. But if you're a large company, you don't have time to sit there for 2 days and tinker on the machine like us hobbyists do. You need that thing switched out ASAP. So pretty much what they'd probably do is just truck you out a new machine, put the broken one in the box, pull the new one out, get it going. So that way, your downtime is minimized, but you're having to pay a premium to do that, depending upon companies and the ecosystems and things like that. But that's kind of an example of what you'd be buying into at a higher price point.
Well, Calvin, what you said a few minutes ago about how you tried calling them, they didn't really respond to anything you said, or were able to provide any support. That leads me to believe that higher price point printer wasn't getting you so not only were you getting an inferior model, but you were also getting inferior service, as opposed to something like Ultimaker or Prusa, or even Prusa at $700. You go on their website and their support is on the ball. You know?
I mean, because the thing is, I was trying to explain to tech support, because they were asking what's your opinions on it? What are some problems you've had? And I was like, well, the extruder keeps clicking no matter what temperature I'm printing at. It'll just jam. They're like, well, print hotter. I'm like, I'm doing PLA anywhere from 180 to 240, and it's not working, period. And I know it's getting hot because I can take a piece of filament to the outside and I can melt it. And, you know, it was, I mean, I was trying to explain in as simple English as I could, here's the problem. Or I'd tell them your web interface keeps locking up. And they're like, well, that's the computer. I'm like, this computer is really powerful. We have a good internet connection. I think we even tried it on a different computer at work at my old job, and it's still, the web interface would just literally freeze up, period. You know, it was, you know, I'm not saying that their tech support was great or bad. I'm just saying that the experience that I had was not exemplary, but I've dealt with other companies like good ones, GoPro. You know, I've had issues in the past and they were very prompt. Like I was having issues with the battery not charging with my Hero 2. So all I had to do was send the old camera back, and they like next day aired me a replacement one because it wasn't charging, sent me a new cable, and even sent me a spare battery for my inconvenience, which was really nice. But obviously you're paying extra for that level of service.
Well, yeah,
you know?
if you look at GoPro, if you're using GoPros, this is a company that manufactures probably 1 billion of those cameras, and you know, the sales guys are walking around with them in their trunk. Because I mean, it's for the cost of that camera. I have in front of me the Monster, which is a clone, obviously, of the GoPro, but it's made by Monster, which is a very good technical company. And the battery that they included with it swelled up because I had it tethered, so the battery is destroyed. But the camera itself works great. I mean, obviously they bought some low-cost batteries from the same company that made the Galaxy Note, but this camera was only $99 for this. And it has all the exact same features as the GoPro, plus it has Wi-Fi and an app, which I think the GoPro has too. And it's much cheaper. And I know GearBest has tons of action cameras on there that are exact clones of the GoPro. So if you're paying $250 for a nice GoPro Hero, maybe not the little cube one, but one of the other traditional style action cameras, and when you send it back to them when you're having a problem and they send you a brand new one, expect that kind of service because you paid for 3 or 4 of them.
Oh yeah. I mean, a good example there is the little $50 Raya Ren camera. You know, if you guys watch my layout tour video, the last one that I did of the Yosemite Short Line Railway, all the still shots of the train going by were shot using this camera because at the time my GoPro's USB cable port was dying, which was really sad. And I couldn't get the screen to work, so I just used this guy. And it's nice because it's got the LCD screen, comes with a waterproof case. Sure, the image quality is not perfect, but I use this for all my time lapsing. And at $50 a head, it's like when I lost the one in the ocean with Danielle. I learned my lesson to use the tether, but at the same time, it was only $50 that I lost, plus the memory card, which is maybe $20 tops. So, you know, I kind of treat these cameras, not that I intentionally put them in danger or anything like that, but I treat them as kind of like the beater cameras. If anything happens to them, they're relatively cheap and easy to replace. If one gets on fire, should one get lost in the ocean, sure, I lost the footage, but it's not like I'm losing $300-400 on the camera, and GoPro's not going to warranty me lighting the thing on fire welding by accident, obviously.
Well, exactly, and that's what I mean about 3D printing manufacturing companies. They're charging $2,500 or $2,000 for their base machine, which, and again, I'm not super familiar with them. And like Chris was saying, obviously their sales were to a different industry. As a comparison, Ray's 3D sells a ton of 3D printers to the special effects industry. And that's one of their niche industries because they buy 5 or 6 of them at a time. And because they're rolling and they're in that cabinet and they are such good printers, they are really good printers. They can put it anywhere they want in their 30,000 square foot shop and print on the spot while they're doing modeling and stuff. Like, you know, companies like Legacy FX, which does all the stuff for like Jurassic Park movies and, you know, like the RoboCop remake that they did, every costume is 3D printed from the start. And then molds are made from the finished 3D printed parts, and then they're run from there because sculpting in clay is time consuming and super expensive. And you need to be able to print out really big parts fast that you can easily cover with Bondo, sand, finish, and mold. and make 10,000 suits for the production. And those kind of companies, they're charging twice as much money as some of the other companies for their printers because of the dollar value that they bring to the table. Now, when you have a company like Type A, who obviously suffered because they had, from your experience, some really shoddy service and kind of a cheapened version of a good printer, the people that were using them were probably doing those modifications on their machines and still using them, but we didn't hear about them because of the niche industry that they may have been servicing. Now, I don't know, they're in California, so they're near Silicon Valley, right? If I'm not mistaken, they're in that area. So they're servicing, I think even Chris may have mentioned it, like probably big airline companies, aerospace companies like that. But those guys are full of rocket scientists who are going to take that printer and make amazing modifications to it to make it even better anyway. So I think they probably had a really great thing going, and they just stopped selling them because the people who had them were modifying them, making them even better, and didn't need them anymore.
No, yeah. I mean, one thing I will say is my old job actually got Raise 3D partly off Joel's recommendation to me after seeing his videos, because what we were doing were large prints and we needed a large volume machine. And I can attest to the Raise 3D for its price point. Man, that thing is nice. If I had to like start all over again and I was doing large prints, I would just go out and buy a Raise 3D N2 Plus dual extrusion and just go from there. You know, their machine definitely, for the price point, it's nice. Yes, it has a few quirks, but overall, I was very impressed with it for the price point that they were charging, and their support seemed good and things like that. So, you know, the thing, I guess, I think the big takeaway from this is not only as a consumer, you should keep the customer service of the machine company in mind, but as a company, you need to keep customer service and customer suggestions at the forefront of your business, because those customers don't feel like they're being listened to, they will go elsewhere and you will suffer. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Sometimes the customer is right, like it or not.
Well, I would also say that there's so much competition also. You know, there was a company by me that was called Makerfront, and they sold a bunch of the printers to, and it was a nice machine. It was a steel frame Prusa clone, but it was high quality. You know, I want to say it was selling for around $700. But the problem is you've got, you know, they're in an industry where a new company pops up every year. You know, think about what companies exist and have existed for multiple years already. You know, you probably can't. You probably can count them on one hand, if not two.
I mean, companies that I know that have been around for a long time are, especially companies from the beginning, are Formlabs, MakerBot, Ultimaker, and PrinterBot. But then again, when you look at them, you know, Formlabs came out with the Form 1, then they came out with the Form 2. PrinterBot originally came out with the wooden simple, then they came out with the metal one. They've kind of branched out into various fields. Ultimakers continually upgraded their Ultimaker 2, then they came out with the 3. You know, you kind of get where I'm going with this. You know, you definitely have to evolve to keep at the forefront of stuff. Or Bruce is a good example as well. You know, he's stuck with overall, the machines have been the same platform, but they've upgraded them as technology got better to keep the interest in there, to keep people wanting to come back for more. You know, if you don't mix things up a little bit, it'll get stale.
If you look at, I don't put the Prusa printer in the same category as these $2,500 to $3,500 printers. Yes, he's got some great innovations, and it's an awesome printer from what everybody says. I've got an awesome printer behind me, so I have nothing to, you know, the bar is set kind of really high for what I see out there. And I get great prints, and I see the community behind the G-Create printers getting really great prints. So I know that this is a really great printer for its price point. But the manufactured on the assembly line style printers that come from not in America, so for wherever they come from, those compete in a different industry because we're in a niche. We're the 3D printing YouTube community. If one of us works in the community, they would have more of an experience with it. I don't. I only know a few people behind the scenes that actually do work in 3D printing manufacturing companies that I've met over the last year. But other than that, the companies that make these 3D printers, like, you know, XYZ has 30% or whatever they have of the market share. It's not just us that they're selling them to. They're selling those printers to massive companies who are doing massive prototyping and mold making and actually using them in such high production runs that we really have no wiggle room to complain when we have a small problem with our mass-produced printer, because it's one of 10 million out there, or maybe it's 10 of 10 million out there that are having problems. But the other 9,999,90,000 whatever printers are all working just fine. So it's just happenstance that sometimes us in the creators community on YouTube and social media, we sometimes get the bad printers for whatever reason. It seems like a lot of people have had some bad luck with a lot of printers. It's not any one printer in particular. And I don't think it's the quality coming out of the manufacturer. I just think it's bad luck. It's just the way it happens, because there's a lot of people having no problems whatsoever with these printers that we see on social media that are having weird extruder jams or not being able to print properly, or the new features don't work. That's one of, you know, so many. Look at Apple's track record. You know, they put out 1 billion units and probably 100,000 of those units are bad. That's actually pretty good. That's a pretty good average.
In the IT field, which is where I spend most of my life, you've got a 3 to 5% failure rate right out of the factory. So within the first 48 hours, 3% of all hard drives fail. That's why that whole burn-in process thing existed. Going back to my point about how many companies have existed and are still in business. You know, Jeff, you work in the movie industry, right? Or the TV industry?
Television, yeah.
So how many companies have come and gone from the TVs? You know, like RCA Victor used to be the biggest company there was, right? In TVs, going back many, many years. You know, Panasonic used to make their own TVs. Samsung used to make their own TVs. There was at one point with the tube TVs, just like you have now with the LCD TVs or LED TVs, you have a bunch of Chinese knockoffs like Element and Changhao but you also have Samsung and a couple other companies like I'm drawing a blank right now, but those TVs will those brands will stick around, whereas the ancillary brands won't.
But that's the nature of the 3D printing industry, is we're about to enter not the revolution, but the evolution. The revolution already happened. And that was when the low-cost, high-build volume printers became affordable to everybody. When everybody started cloning my awesome machine back here and started putting out their own versions of it, that's when it changed the industry. And now everybody is trying to change the high-end to give their high-end customers more quality features. And the lower price point printers are trying to include those exact same features, so there is no middle ground anymore. And I think that is what's going to happen, as it did with video. For instance, there was a point when it was Betamax, and then VHS came out, and then VHS-C, and then High 8, and then all these different brands came out, and then what happened? They reinvented it, and it became the DVD. And that's where it stopped. You don't buy VHS. The only companies that still use magnetic tape, to my knowledge, are television networks, because they still have to archive stuff. But it's a different kind of tape. It's something you wouldn't even be able to recognize if I handed it to you. It's a cartridge, it's round, and it's just very different. But that industry rose up, conquered, and then died because the DVD industry took over. So all these millions of companies had nothing to do with all that blank tape. So now what are they doing with their plastic factories? They're making filament. the same companies making the filament that probably made your VHS tapes 20 years ago. It's just retooling the factories now to do something different to catch up with the industry. So with 3D printers, these companies that didn't stay current and didn't stay on top of the community and the people, their user base, they're all going to fall away slowly, and the cream will rise to the top. And then we'll have also the lower price point versions of those same machines, like a Prusa with all the bells and whistles. And those will be the ones we'll be able to afford. And the companies that are buying the $2,500 plus machines will continue to buy those machines. It's the evolution stage now. We've got to evolve our 3D printers into being something cool, not just a tool, so we can get them on everybody's desktop. And I was just at CES with Heather, and the majority of the printers were the size of a cube. They were this. That's what everybody is shooting for. All your big guys were there, but the rest of the companies from the Shenzhen system were all selling tiny little cubes. And that's what we saw everywhere. Even the funded ones through crowdsourcing that were there, like CubeBot, they also were touting a tiny little printer. That's what they want to sell everybody, because that will get it on the desktop in every home. No one's going to buy a Prusa and have their kids around it unless their kids are technical savvy. They're not going to buy a G-Max with their kids because that will take your hand off. I love the printer, but it's still a machine. It's still a machine. There's nothing more to say.
I mean, to make the point for small stuff, reality is this is a 1/48 scale narrow gauge locomotive that I think I'm estimating dimensions here, but it's no bigger than about 6 inches long by about 3 inches high by about 1.5, 2 inches wide. You know, the thing is not very big, and the reality is a lot of the stuff that I do for this is small detail parts. So a small capacity machine might sound like a bad idea to some people, but for my select niche market, I do like the bigger capacity of the Ultimaker. The reality is a lot of what I'm doing is very tiny stuff. And in reality, a lot of the things, when you think about it, you know, if you're doing, oh, here's a good example, like crap, like my mic body here. This thing is not very big. Here's my hand for comparison here. You know, it's not very big, but this is something that could easily be pulled off in a machine the size that Jeff was talking about. Coffee cups, pencil holders, you know, that sort of stuff.
Well, to be honest, most of the stuff I've printed would fit in that machine. And even the stuff that I do for the can marker, like my little at Walker here thing, it's tiny. The problem with doing big prints on most printers is either you have to go to a bigger nozzle and lose resolution, or it takes time. You know, I don't know. My kids will lose interest if I put on a 10-hour print. You know what I mean? They'll look at it, they'll walk away, and that'll be it.
But that's the nature of the industry as we're headed, though, because if you want to get, 2 years ago, Mattel said that they were going to put out the ThingMaker, and they touted it, and they had it at CES. I didn't see it. That was the year we didn't go. And they were pre-selling it on Amazon. It was the kid-friendly 3D printer. I still have on my iPad their little ThingMaker software where you can, it uses the ball joint 3D printing method, and you can assemble your own little creatures and make your own toys. And I sent one to my Dropbox, and I sent it over to the G-Max, or sent it over to Simplify 3D, and it said it would take 9 hours to print. And that was at a general 45 millimeters per second, 0.2 millimeter layer height, yada, yada, yada. It was a general print speed. And I thought to myself, when your kid is designing a toy on his iPad, he's going to want to play with it immediately. What Mattel had done is they had created like a bit of a game to play with it on the iPad until it printed. So they had a really good idea going there, but I don't know what happened to it. I mean, it just never came out. The printer is nowhere to be seen. But they knew where the industry was going. They wanted a kid-friendly desktop 3D printer that was the size of a 12-pack of beer. I mean, literally like a small cube, a little 10-inch cube. And that's what everybody wants. And that's what the majority of the printers were at CES. So those companies are going to start coming up, and the Prusa clones that you see on GearBest and some of the other sites will start to swap out. You'll start to see the smaller printers, and then you'll see the CR10 clones coming out in that same vein. And that middle ground area there will be filled in by the actually good printer like the Prusa and some of the other ones that you can buy now. So it's shaping up to be a really interesting finish, I think, for 3D printers. I think we're about 2-3 years away before it gets to the point where a company like Canon goes, we're losing money to 3D printers. We need to put out an FDM printer or a lasers and goo printer to compete with all the other companies, because people aren't buying our printers anymore for $49. They're buying $2,500 3D printers and printing up toys for their kids. So there's a shift. It's going to happen. I'm saying 3 years maybe, but this is the start of it. This Type A machines, a company that could have been or should have been better, failing, I'm guessing to say because of their service, or they just didn't sell any machines. The email or the letter on their homepage doesn't really allude to the actual issue of why they've had to close their doors. They just talked about their accomplishments and then waved goodbye. So it's kind of hard to tell from something like this. But if we see a larger company, and I don't know who that would be, say, you know what, we're selling off our profits, or Stratus has offered to buy us out. We're no longer going to make a consumer grade printer, which I hear has happened before. So, we're going to see that shift again. It happened 5 or 6 years ago with Stratus and all the big guys suing everybody for their patents. And then they backed off and let us all fight amongst each other to make really cool DIY style printers. And now they're going to creep back in and take it all away eventually. Maybe not them. Maybe it'll be XYZ. Maybe it'll be another company. But I sense there's going to be a unification where you could go to Best Buy, Walmart, Target even, and buy filament and maybe even a printer.
You can also go to Lowe's and buy one.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go to a hardware store and have them amongst all the other tools, because
if you go to Lowe's, you can go get a Dremel printer and Dremel filament right now, 1.75.
Right. They did have them there. That's right. I do remember that at Lowe's. They had the Dremel printers there along with the Dremel tools. They just, in Las Vegas, we don't see a lot of that stuff, but it's on their app. So it says it's in store. I do remember seeing that. So,
well, I think also we're going to see, if we move to more of that ecosystem that you're talking about, I think we are going to see more of kind of like with your printer at home. Speaking of which, I need to place the toner and the laser printer downstairs. But, it's going to come pre-packaged. It's going to be the genuine blankety blank company filament, and you stick it in there. We're seeing it a little bit with like the Ultimaker 3 that has the NFC rolls, but it will do non-NFC filament. It doesn't matter. It's a handy feature. But at the same time, I do kind of see that happening. You know what I mean? And it's both a good thing and a bad thing. And I really feel like it's a lot of stuff with the hobby and the industry in general. We don't know what's going to become of something until it actually happens. So I'm really curious to see where this is going to lead. Is this going to create a vacuum that people are going to fill? Or is it going to just kind of dissolve out and only the best are going to survive? We'll
I
see.
think that's going to happen. I mean, as a for instance, Kodak, so late in the game, introducing a fully loaded 3D printer, dual extruder, all the bells and whistles that you could possibly want. In my opinion, it was a badass looking 3D printer. I got hands on it at CES, got a chance to talk to the guy with the long nose hair, and it was a really, really cool 3D printer. Now, understandable, they saw an industry that was taking money out of their pockets. Whether they were in it or not, they still saw it. So they said, let's put out our 3D printer. If you look at the history, you can go to YouTube right now and do a Google for Kodak 3D printer. This isn't new to Kodak. They actually introduced this a couple of years ago at CES or one of the other technology shows, and it just never came to fruition until now. But caveat, they don't have them in the market yet. It's still 2018 release. They have a whole year to play with. So they said spring, possibly we'll see it. But they had a working machine. They have filament. They have all the bells and whistles that they need. And it was in a really good position at CES in the Kodak booth that they got a lot of exposure. They did a really good job. But seeing as Kodak is one of the first big, and we're talking a really big company here, they own a ton. They're still really involved in the film industry and really involved in photography and still involved in the back end of photography. So we're not talking about a small company entering the marketplace. We're talking about Kodak. And at the same time, non-3D printing related, they're reintroducing a lot of their old lines of film too, like Ektachrome movie film for Super 8 cameras. And they actually have a brand new digital Super 8 camera that has some features that I shot some video on that blew me away. Its price point's crazy. It's about $2,000, but it's an awesome piece of tech that Kodak is putting out. So look at it from that standpoint. Who's next to introduce a 3D printer that would be unexpected?
I mean, I almost wonder, I mean, it's a little bit like bringing it back to the Aldi grocery store offering 3D printers initially as kind of like a publicity stunt to get people in there. Then, like you said, I have yet to view it, but I guess Angus did a video where he went down there, and I guess they had, instead of having just like a couple, like what they do at Black Friday sales out here, where we got the new iPhone, we got the new Android, but they got like 3 of them to get people in the door. I guess, like, I think it was Jeff was saying, I guess they had like a whole pallet full of them, and they weren't really selling according to the video.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't know if he'll do, I would like to see him do a follow-up video, go back there again tomorrow, which would be right now at this point, and see how many have sold. And
if any.
I'd be kind of curious to see if, you know, if there were still 2, you know, sitting on the skid, or still 20 of them sitting on the skid, because, I mean, there's a huge community in Australia and New Zealand for 3D printers. You know, Angus isn't the only person down there. There's a lot of other creators down there. But I do remember him saying there's not a lot of companies producing, manufacturing 3D printers in that area. So accessibility has always been the issue. So if there was a whole skid of them sitting at an Aldi for $3.99, I think it was actually relatively cheap for one of these. And
Australia and a lot of those countries have pretty high import taxes on items on top of shipping to get something there. So it's like if somebody had the disposable income to do it and really wanted to, you know, jumpstart getting into like a 3D printing farm, my gosh, I could see somebody going in there going, yes, can I buy all the printers on the pallet, please? Thank you.
That's funny. And somebody would actually probably do that too, because there are so many of them. I mean, in the last year when they did this, they only shipped 2 or 3 to each store, and they went quick. So they're anticipating selling 24, a whole skid of them, and there wasn't a line at the door. Angus said it was like a bunch of old people waiting to buy food.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, because well, you got to remember back a year or 2 ago, I mean, having a 3D printer was like, people had them, but it was still kind of like, what? You have a 3D printer? Like, people were still like amazed that you owned a 3D printer. Well, and then fast forward a year now, and, you know, like Seth was saying, he got his for like pennies on the dollar compared to what, you know, we spent for our machines respectively. And it's partly because of what they were and partly because of when they came out and things like that. But still, I mean, the price has gone down, and the shine of 3D printers, like you guys have said, is kind of gone. They're still useful and they still have their place, but they're not the latest, greatest, wowie, oh my gosh, got to go and get it item that they were a couple of years ago. They're now more mundane, like, yeah, it's a 3D printer.
The other thing that you're not quite comparing apples to apples. If I remember correctly, Aldi's offered them during Christmas time the last time.
Yes, they did.
That was one thing. Number 2, the price point is exactly the same for the exact same printer 2 years later.
I thought he said it was the Cocoon Touch.
I think it's, from what I know, he said that it's at least back in the old videos when it was the Cocoon Create that he got his hands on, it was just a relabeled Wanhao Duplicator i3. But as they went along, they made some running revisions to it. And touchscreens now are actually pretty common on 3D printers. I'm personally not a giant fan of them, but, you know, that's just personal opinion there. I personally don't like touching a screen. It just wigs me out, even though I have a touchscreen phone. Go figure. But that is a good point, though. When they were selling it, it does make a huge difference. If you're doing it around a major holiday or something like that, you're definitely going to affect the sales differently than just randomly, hey, we got a skid full of printers, come on in and buy one. Everybody's like, what? You know what I mean?
I got a question for you, Calvin.
Sure.
On that A-Machine printer, what was the web interface? It wasn't Octoprint, was it?
It was their modified version of Octoprint, from what I was told. But the problem was, because it was through the internet, there was a pretty significant lag that you'd notice between giving it a command. And obviously, it takes a while for a signal to go through the internet, and then probably just some Octoprint server, however it works, and then goes to the machine. But they were using their own brand, their own flavor of Octoprint. So you use like some weird web address to access the machine. It was, I can't remember all the details of it, but I believe it was a modified version of Octoprint. But you didn't have very many controls in the web interface compared to what people were saying you could do through Octoprint, which is a little bit frustrating as well.
Well, it just surprises me. And this is one of those big things that blows my mind. Like Jimmy's G-Tech that has the built-in web interface or the built-in, touchscreen interface with his phone. Why is it, Octoprint's open source. Most of the time, open source projects like Firefox, or one of those, they get integrated into other stuff, and that's how the project is funded. In other words, why are these companies going out and recreating the wheel when Octoprint works really well from my experience with it? Why are they not licensing it and using it?
That is honestly a really, really good question. And I think that a good example of that would be Tico, which decided they were going to try and create their own ecosystem, their own slicer. They weren't going to do their own version of Kira or talk to Simplify 3D and do their own, licensed version of it. No. They decided they were going to start from scratch and build their own slicer to work with their own machine over Wi-Fi. And I'm like, why? There's so many slicers out there on the market, but I think companies don't like the idea of using an open source product because then they're worried people are going to go charging their doorstep going, release the source files for the machine. I really don't know. That's honestly a really good question that I can't answer, but I think it might just be the company feeling like, well, because we're in Silicon Valley and there's programmers everywhere, we can just make our own version ourselves and we don't have to, give anybody credit for it, and we don't have to potentially pay them anything. I really don't know what they're thinking. I'm just kind of spouting out potential reasonings behind it, but that's honestly a really good question that I really don't know the answer to, and I wish I did, because I think that would explain a lot of stuff, if you know what I mean. Jeff's readjusting his camera.
No, I had Stella. She jumped up on my lap. I thought maybe she was going to make an appearance on camera here, but no. A lot of the things with these low cost 3D printers that seem to bother me, and I put together one of these TiVo tarantulas, and honestly, it's like Jimmy said, it's probably a really great printer, but it had problems. I mean, I haven't gotten a successfully great print off of it before I just put it in the closet and gave up on it because I had the 365 project going on. But now that the project's over, I still don't want to take it out and play with it because I don't want to be frustrated. And I don't want to put a bunch of time and effort and money into fixing something that granted it was given to the channel for review. But if I had gone out and paid for that printer and then had to do more modifications out of the box, knowing in advance, because I did know that before I even put the printer together, that I would have to do modifications to it to make it better. But I'm a knowledgeable consumer. If you're getting into the industry, you stumble across Joel's channel in the feed one day because he printed something or he was involved in some project that happens to be in your same industry or whatever you're interested in, or one of the other creators, it doesn't have to be Joel or anybody, and you're like, wow, I should probably get a 3D printer. check it out. What's up with that? What's my budget first? That's always what people are going to say is, I wonder how much they cost. So they're going to go to what's the first source they're going to open? Amazon. They're going to go right to Amazon. They're going to search for 3D printer, and Amazon's algorithm is going to spit out some of their top sellers and a couple of cool ones underneath that.
And it's going to sort by lowest price.
Yeah, and then the first thing they're going to do is hit sort by lowest price and see which ones are the cheapest, and they're going to be inundated with all this information. So what is the next thing they're going to do? They're going to start looking at the reviews of the ones they think look cool. And they're going to see all these planted reviews from companies along with the genuine reviews. And they're still going to be a little bit confused, but they're going to want to pull the trigger because this isn't something they're going to want to sit around for weeks and weeks and weeks and do their research. They're interested in it. They want to buy a printer. They have, say, $1,000 to spend. So they're probably going to go with a name they've heard of before. In the back of their head, a company like Dremel or Kodak or, you know, Ultimaker, because Ultimaker does actually TV commercials, they're probably going to be like, where are those printers in my price range? And then they're going to find the one, which will most likely be either the Dremel Idea Builder or Idea Maker or whatever it's called, and the one that's under $1,000, and they're going to buy it. And they're going to buy into their ecosystem, like Chris was saying earlier, and they're going to buy only their filament because they're not as a knowledgeable consumer as we are in the industry. So then they'll get a couple of months underneath. They'll start joining the Facebook communities, the YouTube channels. They'll start following, and they'll realize, oh, maybe this wasn't the good printer for me. They'll go out and buy another printer at a different price point, and more than likely will begin to tinker with it and be able to use open source hardware and software, meaning, you know, filament, and not be stuck in that ecosystem. And eventually that printer that they originally purchased may end up on the shelf and they'll never use it again. And that's what's happened with the industry. And that's why it needs to keep going in this evolution stage of being able to put out an affordable printer with all the bells and whistles, with great support, and maybe not 100% open source, but at least be able to use filament I can buy from a company like, say, Matter Hackers, and not have to buy into their ecosystem.
Oh yeah, one good
that's us as creators. That's not the big businesses. That's not your aerospace industry or your technology, your headphone companies who want to buy these to print out, you know, samples of what their headphones are going to look like in the future. They're not going to buy a Prusa. I firmly believe they're going to go because their boss is going to go, well, for $2,500, we get this one with all this awesome support, and it comes with all these bells and whistles. And look at this awesomely produced television commercial that looks really cool. What's this other company's name again? And that's what they're going to do. They'll spend the $2,500 or $3,500 and buy this other one for their company, because when the big boss comes by later on, he's going to want to see something in a shiny wrapper with cool logos and lots of really great track record behind them. They're not going to want to buy a GearBest or Shenzhen knockoff because they have to prove it to their boss that this money was worth it, and it's got to produce good things. You're not going to hire a special guy to come in to fix your 3D printer. You know, are there companies even out there like that, like service companies for like laser printers that you can buy contracts with for your 3D printers? Maybe by Ultimaker there are, or by these big companies, but not for a Prusa or for a G-Create or for a G-Tech or any of these other brands. They don't have that. They can't afford to do it.
Well, you guys know, well, Calvin, you know of Barb from Flexi Print or 3D Print New York.
Yeah,
she lives right by me, and I've talked to her a few times, and she's a very nice lady. But what she said to me was, do you fix 3D printers? Because apparently, you know, a lot of people buy 3D printers, and then obviously they're not buying the greatest quality, or even if they're buying, you know, a TiVo and spending $400 on it, they still don't, you know, they still don't print right out of the box. So I would assume that at some point you'll see local computer stores doing repairs on them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one thing that I was going to mention, two things actually. One that was really good was Rover made a comment, word of advice, don't trust just one source, read reviews, watch multiple videos, etc. And one thing I'll add into that as well is, you know, if people are having a bad experience with a printer, ask them which one it was. If they're having a good experience with the printer, ask them which one it was. And, you know, by asking people who've had bad experiences and good experiences, you can kind of be like, okay, well, explain to me, why were you having this problem? Why were you, you know, this or that? You know, that's a good point. But then my dad just made a funny point. He goes, when Harbor Freight starts selling 3D printers, I'm honestly waiting to see them start doing that or come out with like a little CNC machine or who knows what. You know,
look at it this way, you can get a free multimeter to diagnose it with it.
ask my dad. He literally has like a stack like this thick of both expired and active coupons, and every time I go down there, we will literally split up when it goes to checkout. So he'll be like, hey, you know, give me another multimeter. Can you get me another tarp?
I don't even have to go very far. Does that look familiar to you?
Oh yeah. You know, it's like if you can get a free multimeter or a free tarp when you're buying who knows what, might as well, you know.
I think I might even have one of their free tape measures kicking around here someplace.
I dumped one of my free multimeters into a bucket of water and the thing still works. I don't care what the insides look like because San Francisco has ridiculously hard water, but the thing still works. I couldn't believe it when it dried out. I mean, things are darn near indestructible.
They're accurate enough to get your diagnosis. So.
I mean, mostly what you're doing is continuity checks and just average ohm meterings. Do I have, you know, is my temp sensor giving me a reasonable range for the, you know, the sense, you know, the resistance for this temperature? But yeah, for what they are, they definitely get the job done, you know. Well, do you guys want to call it a night here? I'm personally starting to fade out pretty quickly here.
Well, it is 2 o'clock in the morning here, so.
I was going to say, you're a couple hours ahead. You must be like crazy late. Me and Jeff are in the same time zone, so we're like, yeah, it's only 11 o'clock, but you know.
Lucky you guys. You're in a warm spot. It's snowing here, so.
Okay, you win.
Well, good night, guys.
Have a good one. Thanks for jumping on, Seth. It was a pleasure having you on here, especially considering Jimmy's out sick, and hopefully he'll be back to normal shortly.
Yeah, Jimmy, feel better. And it was a blast. If you ever want to have me, I will come back.
Definitely, we'll let you know. It was awesome. And are you still doing the Kickstarter for the can marker? Or whoops,
I think he left.
Oh well, he can. If he's Seth, if you're still hearing this, if you can post up about that in the comment section, that would be awesome for everybody. Go check out his can markers. They're actually pretty awesome, yeah. And they're a niche product, but they definitely fit, you know, a niche market, and they're definitely also a very interesting use of 3D printing, which I'm all for.
Yeah, I've never actually seen those before. I wanted to get a good look at them. So yeah, Seth, if you're still watching, definitely post a link down in the description or in the comments area there, and let me check those out. I've seen it. I do remember seeing them. I remember, I don't know if it was you, Calvin, who reposted up on social media at one point a couple of months back about those.
I think
I remember seeing them. Those are cool little things for the top of the soda beer cans, right?
Yeah, top of any soda can, any can that has a pop tab on it. You know, when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, I don't need that at first. But then when you really think about it, you're like, no, you know, if there's multiple people who drink the same drink in the house, or it's inside of a koozie or something, it's a very easy way to go, oh, I'm green, you're purple, and you're red. You can very easily tell whose is whose without being like, well, which drink is this? Oh, I don't know which one it is. You know, that whole thing. So,
yeah, they do that same thing for the what is it, wine glasses. They have those little wine things at the bottom of the, what do they call it, charms or something for wine glasses. So when you're at a party with a bunch of people, you don't drink their stuff.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's it's definitely an interesting product, and the fact that he's doing it using 3D printing, especially a low-cost machine, definitely shows that you don't need to have, you know, really, really fancy equipment Not that there's anything wrong with my Ultimaker. Don't get me wrong. I always say I don't regret buying it, but now that there's lower cost options on the market, I would definitely consider one, or a bigger one. You know, but the main point is the fact that he's using a low cost machine to make a product like that is definitely encouraging to people who may want to try prototyping things out at home, but going, man, do I really need a fancy printer? Really good example of a lower cost machine that can, you know, at least do short run, you know, prototyping and potentially even production if, you know, if it's time and cost feasible.
Well, there's a lot of really good low cost machines out there for prototyping. And I know a lot of companies, printers to make mold, you know, positives, negatives for their processes for whatever they're doing, because obviously sending these things out to custom mold makers and stuff like that is gone. That industry is, I don't say it's gone, but I can definitely see that it's fading away, because it's so much easier to prototype right out of AutoCAD or any kind of CAD-based software, even a 3D modeling software. Like I use Cinema 4D. I've been working on some stuff for one of my projects, and I'm making some little additions to something I'm working on. But I decided to go with Cinema 4D instead of using Fusion, because I know Cinema 4D, and it's a lot faster for me. It's a lot less frustrating, and I don't need an internet connection. Now I know you can work offline with Fusion 360, but it helps to have it online at all times because they constantly put out updates. But
Yeah.
My problem is, and I love Fusion 360, I think it's a cool program, but every time they put out an update, they don't really say anything. You have to be like on their blog every day or every week to see all their constant updates with it. With Cinema 4D, it's stuff that's under the hood. It's just fixing issues with the code, or, you know, bugs that might be causing problems. They're not adding new features constantly. They wait to do that at the end of the cycle of whatever their software cycle is, whether it's 18 months or 2 years or 4 years. Whereas these online programs like Tinkercad and some of these other ones, they're constantly updating. I'm like, I wanted to go into Fusion and do something, and I had to wait for the update to finish because it was just lagging. So I said, you know, the heck with it. I'm just going to go into Cinema, and I have the same functionality because I know how to use the application in a way that I can have a sort of faux timeline in Cinema of what I've done, and I can put stuff on layers and turn it off and hide it, make duplicates and keep working. And if I make a mistake, I can just delete that, go back to the originals, pull another copy out and keep working. But that's because I know Cinema 4D. So to me, it seemed more logical just to go that route instead of getting frustrated in an application I already love, but they've made so many changes. I can't find the thing I knew how to do 6 months ago.
No, yeah. I mean, it's like, I'll be honest, for the longest time, because AutoCAD was my native universe that I worked in for the longest time, even after Fusion 360 came out for a while, I just didn't know how to use it. So I didn't use Fusion. I kept using AutoCAD. And everybody's like, why are you using AutoCAD? I'm like, simple. So what I know. So
exactly. And you're
now that
these small, you know, these desktop printers like you were talking about, like he uses to do his low cost printer to do his prototyping. That's what a lot of small companies are doing. But a lot of the big companies are still buying the Ultimaker, like behind you, because they want to have 110% reliability on the machine, not 95, 98, 99% reliability.
Yeah.
While there's nothing wrong with the low-cost machines, they all work great, but they do require a little bit more TLC than a proven product that's out in the industry doing prototyping already.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess a good example is the difference between the Thingomatic and the Ultimaker. Both of them will crank out prints, and as you guys have probably seen from the various time lapses, main reason why I'm using the Thingomatic right now is because it has the built-in lighting. I'm redoing the lighting in the Ultimaker to make it better. I have a video on that soon, hopefully. The main point is the Thingomatic works, but at the same time, it's a lot more labor intensive. I mean, I need to go in there occasionally and re-level the bed, or something gets loose, so I got to retighten it. Can't even remember the last time I did something on the Ultimaker. I think I adjusted the fan shroud a couple days ago because somehow something got shifted and it was like touching the heater block, so it was cooling it too much and it was causing an alarm. But that's like a very minor tweak. It's not like I'm getting in there under the hood every other day to re-level the bed or anything like that. I mean, the thing can sit for 2 weeks, throw filament on it, start it up, and it cranks out a print. You know, there's this one though, while it will print, it needs a lot more help. We'll put it that way. And there's just times where it doesn't work. Like in the Mario cereal bowl amiibos, there's that one bowl where it's like shifted a little bit because when it was doing the top layer, it kind of jammed a little bit, and all of a sudden it missed steps, which, you know what I mean? It happens.
It does. I mean, I have the, you know, for almost, well, right after we finished the 365 project, a couple hours later, I told you guys I started printing. I did a filament bunch of prints out, and, you know, but since then, it's kind of trickled off over the last couple of weeks, last 2 weeks. I haven't really been printing as much. I've been working on, you know, doing some finishing and getting some other content ready for you guys on the on my channel. And what I noticed is that, you know, even though I printed with this thing for 365 days straight and it sat for almost a week, all I did was just grab the SD card, load up a file, turn it on. I didn't even run a purge or anything. I just went ahead and started printing, and it printed just fine. There was no, I'm actually very impressed that I mean, this isn't coming off a manufacturing line in a facility. This is still being assembled by hand by artisans in New York or wherever. So, I mean, it's still a grassroots company. They're still doing everything the way they want to do it. And they're putting out a really great printer, even though it's in that higher price range. This is perfect for prototyping for a large company. And large companies do use this printer. Now, if you're looking for build volume and price point, this is in a different class. This heads up to the Raise 3D printer price range and up. And you're paying for all the bells and whistles, but you're also paying for the massive build volume that the printer can actually print entirely in. You know, that some of these printers have big build volumes, but can the CR10 print edge to edge quality prints?
So. Well,
I wouldn't think so.
Well, the other thing that I find interesting about that is I follow Gordon from G Create on Instagram, and like that massive one where they pretty much like made the x-axis into like a ridiculously long one for doing, I think it's like the skateboard or something.
Yeah.
It's almost like they took 2 G Creates at least and like stuck them together with custom length extrusions. But the ability of them to create a customized machine like that, because of its modularity, really puts them in another league, especially for, you know, a company that goes, hey, we don't have a big budget, but we need a machine that's got, I don't know off the top of my head what your dimensions are, but I'm just going to make something up. Say we need something that can print 18 inches in the y-axis and like 36 inches in the x-axis and like 24 inches in the z. G-Create could very much go, yeah, give us 2 weeks and we can have that thing at your doorstep ready to go. Other people would be like, no can do. It's just the way their machine's set up. Not that it's good or bad. It's just the modularity of their machine definitely lends it better to customization for just ridiculous builds like what G-Create did for the longboard, which is absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and they're still using that machine too, and that's what I really like about it. I mean, it is 16 by 16 by 21 inch build volume for the standard printer, so I know that they can take that and just increase the axis across, or even go. I mean, they could go X or Y. You know, Z, obviously 21 inches is more than enough to go as far as height goes, but to create a giant bed printer like that, they've already got the foundation with their printers being very successful, being as big as they are, printing really tiny and really big. So when they make that transition, which obviously Gordon is doing that now, is doing custom builds for possibly companies. I mean, he wouldn't, I think he did that as an experiment, but I think behind the scenes, what we might see is more customizable G-Max printers going out into the wild for people who actually say, hey, you know what? I like it, but can you give me 21 inches square? I'm sure Gordon would be like, yes, sir, we can. Whereas, like you said, a company like Ultimaker would be like, yeah, that's not in our wheelhouse. thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. And it's not that the product is bad. It's just the way that it's created limits it. But that, it's at the end of the day, it's like, I think it is good though that we have companies like Ultimaker where you can cruise in there and just grab one off the shelf and take it home and plug it in and go. Exactly. And there's companies like G-Create that can be like, hey, yes, we can build that crazy idea that you want. Give us a little bit of time, a little bit of extra cash. Boom, shows up at your doorstep and you're like, what? It's that ability to be that flexible that I think is what's going to really define the market, especially being that, prop industries, movie making and things like that are really starting to turn towards 3D printing because it frees up their model makers to do more practical things like building, suits and stuff. And they can hire a couple of lower price people to come in there and just knock out the models, or being that it's 3D printed, say they need a bunch of iterations of something, they can very easily do that,
Exactly.
It has.
For instance, is over on Instagram, I'm actually following Rick Baker. He's an Academy Award-winning makeup effects artist. He kind of retired and he sold a bunch of his stuff at auction for Men in Black and all the stuff he had done. But he's slowly making his way back into the industry. And I think what sparked his interest was 3D printing. Now, he's been posting over on Instagram some of his work, and some of it is just, it's incredible. He's using a Raise machine, and he's putting out stuff that he sculpted in ZBrush from years ago. And I've seen the prints over there on Instagram, and it is way impressive, the print quality. That this is a guy, obviously, who got into 3D printing, got himself a printer, and started using it and learned the craft because that's what he does as his background. He can make molds, he can sculpt, he's an artisan, he can do all that stuff. So just transferring his digital designs over to a 3D printer was just natural for him. It was super natural for him. And seeing the work that he's doing is so impressive. It's just like, wow, this is a part of the industry that some of us may not even be exposed to because we don't follow in those circles. But I'm very much a huge fan of special effects, especially practical effects. And the fact that the industry grabbed onto 3D printers long before I even knew what they were and has been using them for years. And now I'm seeing the fruit of their labor in some of these movies. And I know when I look at a costume on a superhero in any one of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I can tell you right now, that was 3D printed. I guarantee, whether it was lasers and goo or FDM, at some point in the creative process of creating even Thor's hammer, there was a 3D printed version of that circulated because it was so much easier to take it from the digital design to a physical object than to send it to the sculptors and have them look at reference photos and spend days making molds and all that other stuff. So the evolution, like I said, the evolution is coming to the industry, and I think it's going to come from a part of the industry that none of us are super familiar with unless you're really following these companies where they're putting their printers. Where does Ultimaker have printers? Where does Raise? Where does BCN, Sigma, all these companies, where are they at? Not just us, because we're not the only ones keeping them in business. Definitely not from our recommendations either. Somebody is buying a boatload of their printers and using the heck out of them. So we're going to see an evolution coming from a different part of the industry that'll make it better for everybody. It's just going to take a little while.
No, I totally agree. And I mean, I guess a good example of it would be I just got in, I don't know if you guys saw it on Twitter or not, but I just got in a P-Poly Moai for myself. And this thing, for a long time, as you guys know, I'm active in the model training community, and usually I've farmed my work out to third-party vendors, and I'm still going to be doing that for things that are too small for the machine to do. But I plan on doing some video series where I'm showing myself 3D designing detail parts for model trains, like generic ones. Like in a couple of weeks, I've got a little exhaust that comes curved up and it goes out, or you could use it on a roof flat. The idea is to kind of show people, A, here's how you 3D design something, because I've had a lot of people asking about that, but B, to show how you go about making it and showing, 3D printing being used in a field that's not as common. It's like earlier today, Keith from also known as Tinkers on Twitter, the other day, I believe it was, he was going, oh my gosh, I'd never thought of using 3D printing for model trains. And I'm like, dude, it's like pretty much what we have to do, especially in the train community that I'm in. So much of our stuff we make is custom. You really, either have to farm the workout or do it yourself, but there's definitely a very niche market for it. The fact that you have that customization to build 1 or 100 or 1,000 of an item really gives you the flexibility to put the time and effort into making a model, putting it up for sale, and going from there. It's going to be very interesting to see where it goes, but I have visions of it going good, especially, and I'm using the model train community because that's what I'm into, but just model making in general, I feel like is, really catching on there. So that's definitely encouraging.
It is. It's very encouraging to see that, like with Daniel Norre's OpenRC, you at the train community, I'm seeing the visual or the special effects, practical effects community really starting to expose their use of 3D printers to the public. So they're letting, in the behind the scenes, you're seeing them in the background going where they used to keep it kind of under wraps. They're like, yeah, we have this $50,000 Stratus machine that we use. And, it's, we have certain, non-compete agreements with them, so we can't show it on camera because they didn't, it was just that time of the industry. But that time's over now because you can get a printer that prints obviously nowhere near as good as a Stratus, it's doing laser sintering, but you can get one that prints pretty close for under $1,000, like the Moai, which that is so awesome that you got one of those. I did see your post on there, and I think it's really cool to see the stuff that was coming out that you were struggling to print with FDM is coming out crystal clear with lasers and goo, and it's like it's worlds apart. And
I know,
as more of those printers like the Moai become available and safer and cheaper with consumables and a lot easier to work with, you're going to see that trend start. I mean, look at every YouTuber creator right now, besides myself and a few other ones. Everyone's got an SLA printer right now. Everyone does. Yeah. The only reason I don't have one is, one, I don't really want one right now because of the mess factor. And two, I just haven't had time to do any custom modeling. So I don't see myself investing in something that I can't put to good use. So like for you with the model trains, and for like Garrett with his modeling, and Chris, he loves the Moai because he can print out all kinds of cool stuff. And he's more of a technical savvy guy anyway, so it's more fun for him on that. But a lot of the other creators, they all have one, or they have a form, or they have a Wanhao, or they have one, some version of the new SLA printer that's out there, because that's the coolest thing out right now, and it's become affordable. It's the same thing that happened with FDM printers. They all went down in price, became affordable for everybody. The lasers and goo, the SLA, whatever you want to call it, DLP, they're all dropping down in price. Now you're going to be able to buy your consumables at the same prices you would be with filament, and a different range of companies will start producing them within a year. I see within a year, this time next year, if we're having this conversation, it'll be about the next phase of 3D printing beyond those two forms.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is, to give you guys an idea, the Moai runs about $1,500 US, which when you compare it to a form, which is about, I think, $2,500,
yeah,
an incredibly cheap price point for an extremely nice machine. Now, one thing I will say is this is not a knock on the Moai at all, but it's definitely a machine that's geared more towards people who do want to get in there and do want to tinker with settings and things like that. When I say it's less plug and play than a form, with the form you can just pull the software in, there's presets and you go. With the Moai, you have a lot more flexibility with slicing that you use, settings, but at the same time, I feel like that's an advantage because you can use whatever resin you want. You can run whatever you want in there, and that flexibility is definitely, I feel it's upside, because I've heard people complain, yeah, the form prints, but it kind of overcooks the layers because that's just the way the software is, and I can't change that. So you end up losing detail because of that, and it can be, it's a give and a take, but I mean, I haven't done very many prints on the Moai because I'm still getting, when I say the post-processing equipment done, I'm still kind of finalizing up my UV cure chamber. I'm trying to find a large enough container to do larger print cleaning with. Right now, I'm just using a little bucket that I kind of jiggle the parts in my gloved hand with up and down in the alcohol, which works fine for little stuff, but I want to, you know, work my way up to bigger models that would require an actual container that I can stick the whole print in and let it soak. But I mean, the mess is definitely something you have to keep in mind. But at the same time, if you're willing to, you know, live with, you know, an area that's dedicated just to the machine and make sure to keep it clean, and you really have a need for it, they are amazing.
Yeah, they are some really great printers, and their niche industry is more towards the dental and jewelry makers. And again, that's another industry that some of us are probably not as exposed to, so we don't see the success rate that they're having compared to the success rate that we're having doing testing and review as a single user, where, you know, every single dentist and every single jewelry company out there that's doing this as a professional is using the SLA DLP printers on a daily basis. They're constantly running stuff out of there because they use a lost wax style resin, or they use a modeling casting resin in the dental industry, because they used to spend thousands on, you know, doing all these molds, and now they do a 3D scan of your head and then they print that out using the SLA printers. So that, again, there's another niche industry that's taking really advantage of this technology that was really unaffordable to us, but in their industry was price point right along with the other machines that they have on their shelves. So they didn't even notice it. But now we're seeing the lower price point. So now we get to take advantage of that same technology that a lot of niche industries were taking advantage of, that we just couldn't see because it was just too unaffordable for us. So it's really cool to see that evolution happening on that side of the 3D printing industry, for sure.
Oh yeah. And sorry, Rover, I kind of forgot about your question there. He was asking what scale I model, and this one's a larger locomotive that I have. I do ON30, which is O scale trains on HO track, so it approximately does 30-inch narrow gauge. But this is the scale of stuff that I do. This one's a larger locomotive. It should give you guys an idea of the larger stuff. But the detail parts that I'm talking about is things like the headlight here, the domes, the whistles and stuff, and the bell are better off commercially. But things like custom, say, cylinders or detail items and things like that, like I want to try and build a custom interior for one of my locomotives that can stick in there and actually light up and have, you know, so you actually see like a little interior with a guy. You don't just see wires and mechanical stuff everywhere. You know, there's a good example of using the 3D printing for a modeling application for a very one-off item, because I don't really plan on making hundreds of my box cab locomotives, but being able to make that one interior that's custom to that one very easily. And if people wanted one to modify to fit their locomotive, I have the file. There's a good example of 3D printing again, making a one-off item that could potentially go into short-run production as well. Well, do you want to go ahead and call it a night there, Jeff?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get Heather went to bed, and I got to get up and go to my eye doctor in the morning. So yeah, I think it might be time to call this one. We went a little bit longer than we even said we were going to go. So
just a little bit, you know, like I was telling my friend, I'm like, me and Jimmy will be like crawling along at like 11:30, like, okay, we're going to kill the stream now, and then get a bunch of good stuff in chat, and midnight rolls around and we're like practically crashing on the keyboard, and we're like, okay, you know what? I think we really got to call it. So at this point, we're going to really call the stream a night. Thank you again to Seth, who had to run a little bit early. Thank you again, Jeff, for coming on. It was a pleasure having you guys here. I hope Jimmy gets over whatever he caught ASAP. I'll keep you guys posted if he is going to be streaming on his channel or not come Tuesday. If not, I might just host the stream over here again. We'll see, but definitely keep him in your thoughts and prayers. He needs to get back to wrenching on the TiVo, because we all know we're dying to see what happens to that thing, right?
Yeah, I think we're all dying to see how far Jimmy will go before he takes that thing out and does an office space on it outside his house.
Oh, I got some good ideas for it in case, he in case he wants to, send it off in a blaze of glory.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me again, Calvin. Hopefully Jimmy will be feeling better next week. If not, you can always count on me to jump in on these streams. I enjoy doing this, and having a chance to talk about all these different 3D printing topics with somebody is cool, and getting everybody's opinion in the chat was really nice again tonight. So I appreciate it. Thank you again.
Hey, it was awesome. It's always fun having different opinions come on here. It really makes the conversation a lot more interesting versus just me going da, 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 and then answering chat, which can get a little bit weird sometimes. Like, I feel like I'm talking too much. Does anybody want to say something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, buddy. But no, I appreciate it, and it's always fun to come in and join you guys on the live stream. So definitely thank you very much.
No problem.
And thanks for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to Calvin's channel. Make sure you donate a few things in the chat again next time, people. It was kind of quiet. I didn't hear the bell go off.
I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I need like confetti and bells to come down, when stuff happens. But
little character run across the screen. Yeah.
Okay. Well, have a good one, guys. It was awesome, and we'll keep you posted about if there's going to be a stream over on Jimmy's channel. Fingers crossed on that one. See you guys later.
Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us.